Michael Foster had always considered himself a reasonable man. At 42, he'd weathered life's storms with patience, a bitter divorce, the economic crash that nearly cost him his home, even his sister's battle with cancer. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had tested his patience like the silver BMW that currently sat in his driveway, gleaming smugly in the afternoon sun. It was there. Again. The third time this week. Michael stood at his living room window, coffee mug clutched so tightly in his hand that his knuckles had turned white. He took a deep breath, set the mug down on the windowsill with deliberate care, and marched toward his front door. The spring air felt cool against his face as he stepped outside, the pleasant weather a stark contrast to the heat rising inside him. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice measured despite the frustration building in his chest. No response came from the neighboring Tudor-style home. The quiet street of Mapleton Drive in suburban Connecticut was known for its well-maintained lawns and neighborly atmosphere. Michael had purchased his modest colonial 5 years ago, charmed by the tree-lined street and the promise of peace. That peace had lasted until 3 months ago, when Patricia Wellington, known to the neighborhood simply as Karen, had moved in next door. Michael approached the offending vehicle, noting how it was parked at a slight angle, taking up his entire driveway. His own car was relegated to the street, where he'd gotten a ticket last week for overnight parking, a violation of the town's ordinances. The $75 fine still stung. He rapped his knuckles against the BMW's tinted driver's window. Nothing. With a sigh, he trudged toward Patricia's front door and rang the bell. Once. Twice. Then, with barely contained frustration, a third time. The door swung open. Patricia Wellington stood in the doorway, her blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, designer sunglasses perched on top of her head despite being indoors. She wore athleisure wear that probably cost more than Michael's monthly mortgage payment. "Can I help you?" she asked, an edge of irritation in her voice, as if he was the one inconveniencing her. "Your car," Michael said, gesturing toward his driveway. "It's blocking me in." Again. Patricia's perfectly lined eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm having a book club meeting." The street was full. That's my driveway," Michael said, struggling to maintain his composure. "Just like it was my driveway yesterday and the day before that and last week when you had your yoga friends over." "I'll only be another hour," she said, already beginning to close the door. "Surely you can wait that long? We're discussing the secret history, and we're just getting to the good part." The door closed before Michael could respond. He stood there for a moment, stunned by the audacity, before turning and walking back to his house, muttering under his breath. Inside, he picked up his phone and scrolled to the non-emergency police line, a number he'd unfortunately memorized over the past month. Officer Jenkins answered on the third ring. "Let me guess," came the familiar voice. "BMW in the driveway again." "You got it," Michael sighed. "Third time this week." "I'll send someone out," Officer Jenkins said, but they both knew the routine by now. By the time an officer arrived, the car would be gone and Patricia would feign ignorance when questioned later. Michael hummed up and sank into his armchair, rubbing his temples. As a high school English teacher, he spent his days mediating teenage dramas and grading papers that butchered the classics. Home was supposed to be his sanctuary, not another battlefield. His phone buzzed with a text from his girlfriend, Alina. "Still on for dinner tonight? I made reservations at Antonio's for 7. Michael glanced at his watch, 5:30. If Patricia kept to her just another hour timeline, he'd have just enough time to shower and change before picking up Alina. Assuming, of course, he could get his car out of the street and back into his driveway. Looking forward to it, he texted back, not mentioning the driveway situation. Alina had heard enough about Patricia Wellington to last a lifetime. The sound of laughter drifted through his window. Patricia's book club, no doubt enjoying wine and conversation while he sat fuming. Michael reached for his laptop. While waiting, he might as well research what legal options he had. This couldn't continue. 2 hours later, not the promised one, Michael watched from his window as a parade of women left Patricia's house, climbing into luxury vehicles and pulling away. Patricia herself emerged last, locking her front door with theatrical precision before sauntering toward the BMW in Michael's driveway. She never once looked his way as she backed out and drove off, as if borrowing someone else's property was her divine right. Michael grabbed his keys, rushed to move his car back into his rightful spot, and hurried to shower. He was going to be late for dinner with Alina. Again. Because of Patricia Wellington. Again. As he shampooed his hair with angry efficiency, a dangerous thought began to form in Michael's mind. A thought involving concrete blocks, mortar, and a long overdue vacation. Sometimes a reasonable man can only be pushed so far. "You should just have her towed," Elena said, twirling linguine around her fork. The soft lighting of Antonio's Italian restaurant cast a warm glow across her face, but even the romantic ambience couldn't dispel Michael's lingering frustration. "I tried," Michael replied, taking a generous sip of his Cabernet. The toweling companies won't touch it without police authorization, and by the time the officers arrive, she's always moved it. He stabbed at his chicken piccata with unnecessary force. It's like she has a sixth sense. Elena reached across the table and placed her hand over his. You know what my father would have done in Mexico? He would have blocked her in with his own car. See how she likes being tracked. Michael smiled for the first time that evening. Elena's practical solutions were one of the many reasons he'd fallen for the art gallery owner 2 years ago. I thought about it, believe me, but then I'd never be able to leave my house. Fair point, Elena conceded, though I'd love to see the look on her face. The next morning, Saturday, blissfully free from teenage sonnets and essay grading, Michael woke to the sound of an engine revving. He glanced at the clock, 7:15 a.m. Who on earth? A quick peek through the blinds confirmed his worst suspicions. Patricia's silver BMW sat in his driveway, this time accompanied by a large moving truck partially blocking the street. Men in uniform were unloading what appeared to be an outrageously large sectional sofa. You've got to be kidding me, Michael muttered, throwing on a robe and stomping downstairs. The cool morning air did nothing to temper his mood as he marched across his lawn. Patricia stood on her porch, clipboard in hand, directing the movers with imperious gestures. Patricia, Michael called out, trying to keep his voice civil. It's 7 in the morning, on a Saturday. She turned, registering his presence with a flicker of annoyance. Michael, good morning. I'm just having a few things delivered. In my driveway? Patricia sighed dramatically, as if explaining something to a particularly slow child. The truck needs space to maneuver. Your driveway is the logical spot for my car while they work. Did it occur to you to ask me first? Michael felt his blood pressure rising, or maybe schedule deliveries at a reasonable hour. This was the only time slot available, she replied dismissively. And really, it's just a driveway. It's not like you're using it right now. Michael stood speechless. The sheer audacity of her logic was breathtaking. It should only take another hour, Patricia continued, already turning back to her clipboard. 2 at most. 4 hours later, Michael sat fuming in his living room as the delivery men finally packed up their equipment. His Saturday morning, his precious free time, had been consumed by the comings and goings of Patricia's home improvement project. The worst part was that she hadn't even bothered to move her car when the truck left, instead disappearing inside her house without a backward glance. Michael's phone buzzed. A text from his friend Dave. Still on for poker at 3? Jack's bringing that microbrew you liked last time. Michael looked at his watch, then at the BMW still occupying his driveway. He'd been looking forward to poker night all week. Might be late, he texted back. Driveway situation again. Dave's response came quickly. Dude, this is getting ridiculous. You need to do something. Something? Yes, Michael needed to do something. He dialed the police non-emergency line again, but as he waited on hold, a different idea began to form. He hung up and opened his laptop instead. 2 hours later, Patricia finally emerged from her house, dressed in tennis whites, racket in hand. She slid into her BMW without acknowledging Michael, who stood watching from his porch, and drove away with casual entitlement. Michael was already an hour late for poker, but instead of leaving immediately, he sat on his front steps and made a phone call. Henderson Building Supply? Yes, I'd like to place an order for delivery next weekend. He paused, a grim smile spraying across his face. Concrete blocks, yes, quite a few, and mortar. I'm building something special. That evening, as Michael recounted the day's events to his poker buddies, their reactions ranged from outrage on his behalf to barely suppressed laughter at the absurdity of the situation. You could put up a fence, suggested Jack, arranging his cards. Needs a permit, Michael replied, tossing chips into the pot. And the HOA has restrictions. Sprinkler system set to go off whenever her car pulls in, offered Dave with a mischievous grin. Tempting but probably illegal, Michael said, though he filed the idea away for consideration. It was Steve, the quietest of the group and a civil engineer by profession, who offered the most compelling suggestion as the night wound down. You know, he said casually, examining his beer bottle, depending on the property lines, that driveway might be entirely yours to modify as you see fit. Michael looked up sharply. Modify? Steve shrugged. Sure. Add a gate, change the surface material, whatever. As long as it's your property and meets code, the HOA can't stop basic improvements. The men continued playing, but Michael's mind was elsewhere, turning over possibilities like cards in a deck. Sunday morning brought blessed relief. Patricia's car was nowhere to be seen. Michael suspected she was at her tennis lesson, a weekly commitment he learned about through neighborhood gossip. Taking advantage of her absence, he retrieved a measuring tape from his garage and began methodically measuring his driveway, consulting property documents he dug out of his filing cabinet. Then he made a series of phone calls to the town clerk's office, voicemail, it being Sunday, to Steve for advice on materials, and finally to Elena. I'm going to need your artistic eye, he told her. I'm planning a home improvement project. Does this have anything to do with your neighbor? Elena asked, amusement coloring her voice. Let's just say I'm reclaiming my property, Michael replied, a new determination stealing his voice. Permanently. As he hung up, he noticed Patricia's BMW turning onto their street. Instead of the usual dread, Michael felt something new, anticipation. Let her park in his driveway today, tomorrow, even all next week. Soon enough, he'd ensure it never happened again. He watched as Patricia pulled into her own driveway for once, tennis racket visible through the rear window. She caught his gaze as she stepped out of her car, and for the first time since she'd moved in, Michael smiled and waved at her with genuine warmth. Her momentary confusion was delicious. She offered a hesitant wave. The week that followed was one of uncharacteristic patience for Michael Foster. Each time Patricia's BMW appeared in his driveway, during her Tuesday evening book club, her Wednesday afternoon wellness coaching session, and twice on Thursday when she hosted what appeared to be some sort of multi-level marketing party, Michael simply observed from his window, taking photographs with his phone and making notes in a small leather-bound journal he repurposed for Operation Driveway. You're being suspiciously calm about all this, Elena remarked on Friday evening as they sat on his back patio enjoying grilled salmon and a bottle of Chardonnay. Last week you were ready to slash her tires. Michael smiled and topped off her wine glass. I found my Zen place. Elena raised an eyebrow. This Zen place wouldn't happen to involve the delivery scheduled for tomorrow morning, would it? The one you've been mysteriously vague about? I have no idea what you're talking about, Michael replied, but his eyes twinkled with mischief as he raised his glass in a toast. To home improvements. Elena clinked her glass against his. To whatever you're planning that's making you smile like that. It's good to see. Early Saturday morning, Michael was already awake and dressed when the Henderson Building supply truck rumbled down Mapleton Drive. He stepped outside to meet the driver, who consulted a clipboard with a whistle. Foster, got your order here. That's a lot of concrete blocks, buddy. Building a bunker? Michael grinned. Just a small project. You can unload everything in the garage, please. For the next hour, Michael directed the delivery crew as they stacked concrete blocks, bags of mortar mix, and various tools inside his garage. He'd spent the week clearing space, moving his lawn equipment, and rarely used camping gear to a newly rented storage unit across town. As the delivery truck pulled away, Michael's phone buzzed with a text from Steve. On my way with the other supplies, got Jack and Dave on board too. Michael smiled. His poker buddies had been all too eager to join what Dave was calling the Great Driveway Rebellion of 2025. The fact that none of them had any real masonry experience was a minor detail they collectively decided to ignore. At precisely 9:15 a.m., Patricia's silver BMW pulled out of her driveway. Michael, who'd been watching from his kitchen window, immediately texted his reconnaissance team, Elena, who was parked at the corner Starbucks with a clear view of the exit from their subdivision. Target is on the move, he typed. Confirm direction? Elena's reply came swiftly. Headed north on Main. Looks like she's dressed for tennis again. Saturday lessons should give us at least 2 hours. Michael sent a group text to his assembled workforce, who had been waiting on standby. Operation Driveway is a go. Repeat, we are a go. Within 15 minutes, Steve's pickup truck pulled into Michael's driveway, followed by Dave's Subaru and Jack's ancient Jeep. The men emerged carrying additional supplies, work gloves, extra trowels, a portable cement mixer Jack had borrowed from his brother-in-law, and a cooler filled with beer for after, Dave had insisted. Elena arrived last, armed with coffees for everyone and a rolled-up paper under her arm. I brought visual aids, she announced, spreading the paper on Michael's kitchen table. It was a surprisingly professional-looking sketch of a brick wall spanning the entrance to his driveway. I took some creative liberties with the design. The group huddled around, examining her drawing with appreciative murmurs. That's actually really good, Steve said, sounding impressed. You've even got the proper layering technique. Elena shrugged. I dated a contractor during art school, picked up a few things. Michael clapped his hands together. All right, team. We've got approximately 1 hour and 45 minutes before Patricia returns. Let's move. The next 90 minutes were a flurry of coordinated chaos. Steve, with his engineering background, took charge of measuring and marking the precise placement of the wall, stepped back just enough from the sidewalk to be fully on Michael's property, but perfectly positioned to block any vehicle from entering. Jack mixed mortar with surprising skill. My summer job through college was masonry, he explained when they stared in surprise. Dave and Michael began laying the concrete blocks according to Elena's design, while she documented the process with her camera for posterity. You know, this is probably insane, right? Dave commented as they worked, sweat beading on his forehead despite the mild spring air. Like actually certifiably crazy. Probably, Michael agreed, carefully positioning another block. But tell me it doesn't feel good. Dave grinned as he slathered mortar onto the next row. Man, this is the most fun I've had in months. My ex-wife would have a conniption if she could see me now. Speaking of, Jack interjected, glancing at his watch. We've got about 30 minutes before tennis Karen returns. We need to pick up the pace. They worked with renewed urgency, the wall taking shape with each passing minute. It wasn't the prettiest construction, definitely amateur work despite Steve's measurements and Elena's design, but it was solid and unmistakably permanent. Standing 3 feet high and spanning the entire width of the driveway entrance, it would be impossible for any vehicle to pass. What about your car? Elena asked suddenly as the final row was being set. How will you get in and out? Michael grinned and pointed to the narrow side yard between his house and the property line opposite Patricia's. I've been clearing that space all week. There's just enough room to create a small parking pad back there. I already ordered the gravel, coming on Monday. You've really thought of everything, Elena said, shaking her head in a mixture of admiration and disbelief. I'm an English teacher, Michael replied. Planning ahead is what I do. Essays don't grade themselves, you know. As they stood back to admire their handiwork, Steve's phone alarm went off. T-minus 15 minutes, people, he announced. Time for cleanup. They worked quickly to gather tools, dispose of empty mortar bags, and hose down the sidewalk. Jack's cement mixer was loaded back into his Jeep, and the remaining concrete blocks were neatly stacked against the side of Michael's garage for Phase 2, a low decorative wall along his front garden that would serve as both camouflage for their true purpose and a plausible explanation for the major masonry project. Perfect timing, Elena said, looking up from her phone. Patricia just pulled into the Whole Foods parking lot. She must be picking up something before coming home. That gives us a few more minutes, Michael said. Final touches, everyone. Dave produced a small potted plant they picked up from the garden center, a cheerful cluster of spring flowers, and placed it ceremoniously on top of the wall. A housewarming gift for the wall, he declared. May it stand strong against entitled neighbors everywhere. They were just finishing their impromptu toast with water bottles, the beer still reserved for a proper celebration later, when Elena's phone buzzed again. She's turning onto our street, she reported, a barely suppressed laugh in her voice. Everyone act natural. The group casually dispersed to their vehicles, which had been strategically parked on the street, exchanging excited glances like children who had successfully pulled off a prank. Michael and Elena remained on his front porch, arms around each other's waists, waiting. Patricia's silver BMW appeared at the end of the street, moving at its usual entitled pace. Michael felt his heart rate increase as it drew closer, a mixture of anxiety and exhilaration flooding his system. The BMW slowed as it approached their houses. Michael watched as Patricia's expression changed from distraction to confusion to utter disbelief, her perfectly made-up face contorting comically as she registered the wall now blocking her preferred parking spot. The first sign of Patricia's counterattack came at precisely 6:47 a.m. on Monday morning. Michael was in his kitchen, savoring the first sip of coffee and appreciating the brick wall visible from his window when the noise erupted, an unholy blend of what sounded like bagpipes, drums, and someone possibly strangling a cat. He nearly dropped his mug as he rushed to the window. Patricia stood on her front lawn in a silk bathrobe, arms crossed, watching with evident satisfaction as two men in kilts set up what appeared to be a full Scottish bagpipe practice session on her property. You have got to be kidding me, Michael muttered, fumbling for his phone to check local noise ordinances. According to town regulations, quiet hours ended at 7 o'clock a.m., meaning Patricia was early by exactly 13 minutes. Not enough to warrant a call to the police, but just enough to perfectly disrupt his peaceful morning routine. As if sensing his gaze, Patricia looked directly at his window and raised her coffee mug and mocking toast. Michael retreated from view, unwilling to give her the satisfaction of seeing his reaction. The bagpipe serenade lasted exactly until 8:30 a.m. when Michael needed to leave for work. As he emerged from his front door, the music abruptly stopped, the pipers packing up their equipment with practice efficiency. Patricia was nowhere to be seen. Subtle Patricia, Michael muttered as he walked to his car and I parked on the street until his side yard parking pad was completed. Real subtle. The school day passed in a blur of Shakespeare discussions and essay conferences, but Michael's thoughts kept drifting to what new torture might await him at home. He wasn't disappointed. When he pulled onto Mapleton Drive that afternoon, he was greeted by the sight of a massive dumpster that had materialized directly in front of his house, blocking not only his usual street parking spot, but also making it nearly impossible for him to access the narrow pathway to his planned side yard parking area. A quick knock on Patricia's door went unanswered, though Michael was certain he saw her curtain twitch as he walked back to his car. He ended up parking nearly a block away. She's filed a complaint with the HOA, reported Dave over the phone that evening as Michael paced his living room. My wife's on the board, remember? Patricia showed up at their monthly meeting claiming your wall violates at least 6 different bylaws and destroys the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. But you said it doesn't actually break any rules, Michael replied, a knot forming in his stomach. It doesn't, Dave confirmed, but she's demanding an emergency hearing and threatening to get lawyers involved. Sylvia says she's never seen anyone so determined over a wall. She called you, let me get this right, a vindictive misogynist engaging in property intimidation. Michael snorted. That's rich coming from someone who turned my driveway into her personal parking lot. Just giving you the heads up, man. This woman means business. The next morning, the bagpipes had been replaced by what could only be described as an amateur chainsaw sculpture class. 2 burly men were carving what appeared to be woodland creatures out of tree stumps on Patricia's front lawn, the whine of their tools starting once again at exactly 6:47 a.m. By Wednesday, it was a therapeutic drumming circle that Patricia had apparently organized for her wellness community. Thursday brought a landscaping crew armed with leaf blowers who seemed particularly focused on the area nearest Michael's bedroom window. Each morning, Patricia was visible supervising these activities, always disappearing shortly before Michael left for work, and each disruption ended precisely at 8:30 a.m. Each evening, some new obstacle appeared near his home, another dumpster, a delivery of landscaping materials that inexplicably needed to be placed in front of his house. Once even a porta-potty for her landscaping crew that somehow ended up directly across from his front door. She's testing your resolve, Elena observed on Friday evening as they sat in Michael's living room, the windows closed despite the pleasant spring weather to muffle the sound of the amateur opera company that had taken up residence on Patricia's lawn for the afternoon. Seeing if you'll crack and remove the wall just to make the madness stop. Michael rubbed his temples. 5 days of psychological warfare had left him exhausted. He barely slept. His students had commented on his unusual irritability, and he'd snapped at a colleague over something trivial in the teacher's lounge. I hate to admit it, but it's working, he confessed. I actually looked up how much it would cost to demolish the wall last night. Elena studied him for a moment, then stood up decisively. Get your jacket. We're going out. Where? Michael asked, too tired to argue. Anywhere that isn't here. You need perspective. An hour later, they were seated at a quiet table in the back of Harbor View restaurant overlooking the Connecticut coastline. The gentle sound of waves and the restaurant's subdued atmosphere had an immediately calming effect on Michael's frayed nerves. Better? Elena asked after he'd taken a few bites of his seafood pasta. Much, he admitted. I needed this. Thank you. Elena reached across the table and took his hand. Michael, can I ask you something? Of course. Is this wall worth it? Really worth it? Because I'm worried about what this is doing to you. Michael sighed, staring out at the darkening water. It's not just about the wall anymore. It's about, he struggled to find the right words. It's about boundaries, literally and figuratively. For months, this woman has acted like my property, my space, my time didn't matter. Like her convenience was more important than my basic right to use my own driveway. Elena nodded. I understand that. I too. But at what cost to your peace of mind? That's exactly it, though, Michael said, his voice growing more animated. I didn't have peace of mind before either. I was constantly worrying about when she parked there next, whether I'd be able to leave for work or make it to dinner with you or poker night with the guys. At least now I'm fighting back instead of just taking it. Elena squeezed his hand. Just be careful this doesn't consume you. That's all I'm asking. As they drove home, Michael felt more centered than he had all week. Elena was right. He needed to regain perspective. Patricia was trying to wear him down, but he wouldn't let her succeed. His newfound calm lasted approximately 12 minutes after they arrived back at his house. What the? Michael stared in disbelief at his front yard. While they'd been at dinner, someone had placed small yard signs all over his lawn. In the dim evening light, he couldn't make out what they said. Stepping closer, he felt his blood pressure spike. Each sign featured a blown-up photograph of his wall with captions like "Ne borhod eyesore," "Property value killer," and "Report this violation." Unbelievable, Elena muttered beside him. She's really escalating. Michael yanked out one sign, then another, his earlier calm evaporating. This is trespassing. This is harassment. This is. He stopped suddenly, noticing a folded paper tucked under his welcome mat. With growing dread, he picked it up and unfolded it. What is it? Elena asked, still gathering the offending signs. Michael's face had gone pale. It's a letter from an attorney representing the Mapleton Estates Homeowners Association. I'm being called to a special hearing next week to address multiple reported violations of community standards. He looked up at Elena, the reality of the situation sinking in. She's actually trying to force me to tear down the wall. Legally, Elena dropped the signs she collected and took the letter, scanning it quickly. This is ridiculous. None of these so-called violations are valid. Doesn't matter, Michael said grimly. I'll still have to defend myself. Possibly hire my own lawyer. He ran a hand through his hair. This is getting expensive and complicated, fast. They went inside, Michael's earlier resolve crumbling in the face of this new development. As Elena made tea, slumped on his sofa, the letter still clutched in his hand. Maybe I should just take it down, he said quietly. It's just a wall. Is it really worth all this?